We are really very, very pleased to have Sarah giving us this in German Oper-Einführung. What would you call that? Just an introduction to this very, very unique opera. And I see the note from Sarah that you are ready. This is an event hosted by the American Friends of Freiburg University. We just had our annual dinner and conference on March 27th, a full slate of programming scheduled for 2025, which will include a film screening at the Leo Beck Institute. It will include a book group, if you will, on the subject of the Russian dissident movement. We'll have music, we'll have political speakers. So please stay tuned. In any event, welcome to one and all. And it is my pleasure to pass the baton over to Sarah Stevens for a discussion of Salome. Sarah?
Thank you, Jeff. We were having some technical issues. Can everyone hear me okay?
Uh,
Does that work? Okay, I'm getting some nods. All right, great. All right, I would ask that everyone mute, please. And we will hopefully have time at the end for questions. And it would be best if you choose, you can put them in the chat or keep them, and we will make sure that we have a time at the very end. We are expecting a special guest, as we announced, Sommer Ulrickson, excuse me, who is the choreographer for the production that I'm giving this introduction on. She will be joining us. I see she's not on the call yet. She will be joining us, I think, in about a half an hour. So what I really want to do at this point is what I always like to do and love to do is to give you kind of a 101 opera introduction to opera. This one is a hard one to do because it is far more complex. It is not it has a lot of tragedy in it. It has a lot of drama in it, but it's also really extreme, which I will talk about. And there's no love story in it. There's no love duet that we're used to with Puccini and with Verdi, not even close. So, but it has a lot of very modern elements in it and that's part of the reason why it doesn't have a love story that I will then discuss. So what I'd like to do, I want to give you an overview of how I do my introductions. The first part will be I will talk about Richard Strauss. He has a really interesting history, and it definitely plays into the style of this opera, which I want to talk about. Then I will talk about his music and the styles that go into this particular opera and much of his music. Then I will talk about the opera per se and some of the really important parts of it that when you see the production, hopefully you will go on Saturday to the theater and see the HD broadcast at the Met or from the Met in your local theater. Give you an idea of what to watch for, what to look for, what kind of things are important that will help you get a better grasp of the opera. And then as always, I will play some of the music. And then at the very end, well, hopefully not the very end, Summer is going to join us, and she's going to talk about this particular production, which I think is absolutely brilliant. I think it's one of the best productions I've seen, certainly the best production I've ever seen of Salome, but really one of the best productions I've seen. I don't want to say ever, but it's pretty darn close because it's so incredibly good. So those are kind of the four parts of this introduction. So first I want to talk about Richard Strauss. He was born and raised and lived most of his life in Bavaria, in Munich. He lived from 1864 until 1949. So he crossed the centuries. And that's really important because it has to do with his persona, his person, but certainly also with the style of his music. Strauss, by the way, is not to be confused with Johann Strauss. Many of you know, you might know two Strausses, or if you know one, you would probably know Johann Strauss. Johann Strauss was Viennese. He's the one who did the waltzes and the operettas, and he was a whole generation ahead of Richard. So they have nothing to do with each other, no relation, just to clarify. So he was born into a very musical, very wealthy and musical family. He had no formal education, no formal music education, I should say, but he really didn't need it because he started playing the violin and the piano at a very early age. He started composing when he was 6 years old. He is considered a child prodigy. People use that word. You know the word in German, right? Wunderkind. Mozart is the one who's referred to mostly as a Wunderkind. That's probably because he died when he was 36. Strauss didn't die until he was well into his 80s, so he's not really known for that. But he was, and I think that has a lot to do with the type of, well, with the volume of music and and how prolific he was when he was composing his music. So I do think that plays into it because he started so young. So he also has a unique path that we really don't have today, but was pretty common, I guess, at the time. Well, not I guess, I know. It was the path of successfully being a composer and a conductor. And that's really important for his career path. He was taken under the wing from two well-known composers of the 19th century. I might have to click out of this one section here. Hans von Bülow and Hermann Levy. Hang on, I have to ask Birgit to change the, I don't know if we're, anyway, I think I wanted to change my gallery view. 1 second. Oh, that's all right. Hans von Bülow and Hermann Levy were two very, very well-known conductors in the late 19th century. Both of them conducted under Wagner. And they took young Strauss under his wing, really kind of brought him to the podium and promoted his career. And that led to three kind of really important posts. The first one was in Weimar. He was, I think, dritte Kapellmeister, so the third Kapellmeister in Weimar. And then in 1894, he went to Bayreuth. So Bayreuth, some of you will know, that is Wagner's opera house in southern Germany that he built exclusively for his own operas. It's a summer festival. Only 11 of his operas are performed there every year, but that's where he really became inundated, I want to say, with Wagner's music. He conducted Tannhäuser there and met his wife, Pauline, who was apparently a very, how can I say this, diva-like personality, a bit bellicose, and she was on the verge of getting fired, and he married her. He married her, and they had a 55-year-long marriage with no affairs, no drama. Well, at least we don't know about the drama, but it turned out to be actually a very good marriage. And for us, in retrospect, for Strauss, it was a godsend because his most beautiful music is actually written for the soprano voice. And Pauline was a soprano, so I think he understood that voice more than any other voice. And I will talk about that a little bit more. So in 1898, and from 1898 to 1913, so right at the turn of the century, he was called to Berlin to become the music director there for the court. Germany was still a monarchy at that time. The court was very conservative, and the music was modernizing, and Strauss was part of that trend and that change. And because he was already so well known, he was able to bring in a lot of the new repertoire and a lot of the new music. He really did, and quality of music. Parallel to that, in Vienna was Mahler. Mahler had become also a composer and a conductor. He was also on the court in Vienna. Strauss was in Berlin. That was really kind of the golden age, I want to say, of classical music at that time, and bringing in newer modern works, Mahler's works, Wagner's works, Strauss's works into the modern repertoire. That went on until 1913. So then I'm going to skip forward to 1933. I think that's an important part of this story. In 1933, Strauss was 68 years old. He was by far the most well-known conductor and composer in Germany. He was at the peak of his career, of his output. Arturo Toscanini, who some of you may be familiar with, the great Italian conductor, was head of the music department in Bayreuth, so Wagner's house in Bavaria. That was an international mecca of music at that time. Toscanini resigned when the Nazis came into power because he refused to comply with the changes in the repertoire that he was seeing. And he actually came to New York City and did a lot of recordings and lived in the building that I lived in, by the way, the Ansonia, for those who know it. So he resigned, and Strauss was appointed to that position and two positions at the same time. He was appointed to be the president of the Reichskammermusik. He didn't apply for the job. He was appointed to the job. He complied. He went along with it. He had a position, I think, well, he had a position of influence at that point in his life because he was so well known and so well respected. But Bayreuth was chosen by Hitler to be really the place where he was going to be appropriating German music to become part of the Nazi ideology. So that was difficult for him. So he was amplifying the German music in particular. It was, Bayreuth was Wagner, so it wasn't changing the repertoire there. It was just reinterpreting the works, which I will talk about later. So Strauss took on those two positions. He never joined the Nazi Party, and if you read about him, this will come up, I think, over and over again. But he had a Jewish daughter-in-law. Her name was Alice, and one of his goals was to protect her, which he did successfully. But she had to go into basically into internment. He hid her basically in his home in Garmisch-Partenkirchen for all those years. He had two grandsons, two boys. They were considered Mischlinge. Those are, mixed race. They too survived, but her extended family did not. Her mother and her grandmother were both sent to Theresienstadt, and Strauss wrote letters to try to get them freed. He actually went to Theresienstadt to try to free them without success, and almost everyone on that side of the family was a victim to the Holocaust. So he did his part. I think it kind of broke him. His musical output during those years was far less than in his previous years, but he hung in there. But at the very end, after World War II, and some of you don't know this, please write this down. I think one of his greatest gifts to all of us, and in terms of his music, are his last four songs. They're actually called the last four songs. It was the last thing that he ever wrote, Die letzten vier Lieder. They're based on poetry. He wrote a lot of tone music, which means written to the poems of German poets. They are just absolutely gloriously beautiful. And Jesse Norman probably did the seminal recording of his four last songs. And he pours his heart into those. And I think you can feel the pain in his leaving, the way he had experienced the world and the way he was leaving the world. So the four last songs, Die vier letzten Lieder. So about his music, I'm going to play for you, as I love to do, a couple of his things that you may already know. First, a picture. I want to show you a couple of pictures of Strauss. This is one when he was in his 30s. This is one when he was, I'm not sure when this was, but I'm guessing this was in the 40s at some point. This is one of him in the 20s. It's actually a short film that was done on him in Amsterdam in the 20s. This is a recording of a text by Nietzsche called Also sprach Zarathustra. And this is a recording, I'm guessing all of you will know this music, but here we go. To say, it starts out with what's called the Urton, which was a term that Wagner used, which is a very, very low note, and it's so quiet you can hardly hear it. But listen, you'll hear it, I hope. That's Strauss.
Very famous.
Yeah. So his music, I want to talk about his music. So starting out from, again, the time span that he lived in. He lived at the end of the 19th century, moving into the 20th century. His father was his teacher. He was a musician, and he was quite strict about his musical upbringing, he did not want him to get to understand or be a part of modern music. So by that, that means that he wanted him to learn Mozart, he wanted him to learn Haydn, Schubert, and Brahms was actually performing at the time, but he was still considered to be a composer of the classical era. What that means in a nutshell is using a structured form, a sonata form, with scales and chords and all having an eight with, the classic ABA form. That was generally, I have to say, generally the structure of the music at that time. Wagner came along, as did other composers at the time, and kind of threw that all out the window. His Tristan and Isolde is 5 hours long, and all of the musicologists were arguing about what key it was written in. They couldn't figure it out. It was one long line of music. There was a lot of dissonance. There were no classic cuts. Generally, in an opera, it has an aria where everything else is stopped at that time. The aria is sung. Then there's a duet. Then there's maybe the chorus music or the recit. In music that started to change, one of the things that started to change at that time was this one long linear line of music where the keys where there was a lot of modulation and a lot of dissonance. Strauss's father was adamantly opposed to that, but of course, at some point he was exposed to it. And I think it's important to know that because he really was a master at, when people talk about how fantastic he was at composing, it was really, really complex. But he brought in a lot of the dissonance, the chromaticism, which means going small scales up and down rather than chords. So it's more horizontal than it is vertical. Did I get that right? He combined those styles. And you will hear it all over the map in Salome. Think of it in terms of when you're thinking about the dramatic changes that took place at that time in the arts. It wasn't just music, it was also the visual arts. I think it's easier to imagine the change in the visual arts than it is in the musical arts. Think of 19th century representational art, which is, for example, a landscape where you can recognize the trees, where they're all detailed, the trees, the houses, the fields, the flowers. It's very representational. Then Cézanne came along in France and started to change that by just drawing simpler lines and reducing it, taking out the details, reducing it to simple lines where you could still recognize the forms and even identify what it was. It was still a tree, but it had taken off a lot of what they considered at that time superfluous. That eventually went into abstract art, where you no longer can recognize the form, identify any kind of a subject matter even. That trend was starting to take place in music as well. I don't think they were as successful at it, but it was certainly happening. And by simplifying the music, Strauss kind of defied that because he did not simplify the music. He actually made it far more complex. So a lot of the criticism of him in that day were his contemporary composers like Schoenberg, for some of those who know him, Ivan Berg, who said he's got way too many notes on the page. He's not simplifying the music, and yet it's very modern. How does he do that? So he was a bit of an enigma, but he also, I think, by adding on to the orchestra as Wagner did, and adding on to the musical layers, made the expression more complex and yet more refined. So I think one word to think of when you're thinking of Strauss's music, I think I keep switching that, sorry about that, but Strauss's music is how refined his music is. He also was considered a melodist. Anybody heard that word? It's something we talk about a lot in modern music today. Is there a melody? Is there something we can sing? Well, he was criticized for being a melodist because he did bring in beautiful, beautiful melodies. And I'm going to play you one of them and an example of how his music, of the beauties of the melodies in his music. Hang on. This is Herbert von Karajan. I believe it's the Berlin Philharmonic. But I want you to just listen to the lushness of the orchestra and the melodies. Yeah, isn't that glorious? So, those of you who know Rosenkavalier, you might even recognize some of those. He's already alluding to some of the melodies that he then used in Rosenkavalier and other parts of his music. So, all right, let's switch to Salome now. So Salome has, I think, one of the things that's recognizable about Salome, and I think is something for you all when you listen to it, important to listen to, is that combination of the dissonance, the harshness, the expressiveness, and yet the beautiful melodies that are intertwined in it. In German, there are two really good words for that. It's called Wohlklang, for those of you who know German, and Missklang. Strauss is known for using both of those elements in his music, and you will hear that in Salome as well. Balsam für die Seele. So a balsam for the soul. Can you say that in English? I hope so. All right. So the story of Salome. So the story of Salome is a biblical story. I think if any of you have done a little bit of research, you would know that. It's the story of the Roman king Herod at the time of Jesus, of his beheading of John the Baptist, after Salome, his stepdaughter, the beautiful young princess, demands the head of John the Baptist in a confrontation with Herod. And in this case, she wins. He ends up beheading John the Baptist. His name is Yochanan in the opera. Yochanan. It's kind of hard one to pronounce, but it's basically John the Baptist. There are two things that actually Salome are very, very well known for, and one of them is the dance. It's called the Dance of the Seven Veils. So the confrontation between Salome and Herod is he's been lusting after her all of her life, and teasing her, wanting her, openly, trying really abusively. We would call it sexual harassment today, abusive sexual harassment. She takes on her power. She takes on her sexuality, and she takes on her power, and she confronts him, and she challenges him, and she stands up to him. And he says to her at one point things get really wild and crazy, and that he says to her, "Tanz für mich." When things are way over the top, he just stops and he says, "Tanz für mich," dance for me. And she at first refuses, and then she says, "Well, maybe give me what I want. Would you grant me anything that I want?" And there's this interchange between the two of them. He agrees that he would basically give her everything. And so she does this dance. The dance is without vocals. It's 10 minutes long. It's called the Dance of the Seven Veils. It has been done. I think it's so fascinating to look at how this dance has been done over the 120 years that this opera has been performed. Everyone has done it differently. I mean, I think initially it was 7 veils that were taken off at various stages until she became naked on the stage. Many opera singers have refused to do that. So over the years, sometimes a dancer would come in and do the dance for them. Sometimes she dances the whole thing naked. Sometimes she doesn't. So it really, really is left up to the interpretation of the stage director. And that's where we lean in to this current stage director, Claus Guth, who has done something very unique with the Dance of the Seven Veils. It's the most talked about part of Salome, the famous, infamous part of the Dance of the Seven Veils. The other part that people talk about a little less, but is really part of the, I want to say, revolting part of this opera, because it has violence, it has disgust in it, it has decadence, a lot of decadence, it has overt lusting and sexuality, sexual harassment. But the other part at the end is she wants the head of John the Baptist, of Yochanan, on a silver platter. He gives it to her. He cuts the head off and he gives it to her. And she's already obsessed with him. There's reasons for that. We'll get into that, but she's already obsessed with him. But the last part of the scene is, oh, here comes Ulrike, is when she kisses him. And apparently people say she'd never kissed a man before. I'm not so sure about that, but here comes Summer, that she had never, that this was her first time kissing a man. But that last scene is really drawn out, and she kisses him and wants to kiss him. Anyway, it's pretty dramatic. I want to welcome my guest here, Sommer. Hey.
Yes, hi.
Hi. Thank you
Hi
so much
there.
for joining us. I want to play one clip of the music. I've just discussed. I was just getting into the dance of the seven veils and the kissing at the end, or the kiss at the end. I do want to play one clip of this just so you can get a sense of the music and the interrelationships between Herod and Herodias, his wife. She is the mother of Salome, so Herod is the stepfather, and it's, as I said before, this is a very corrupt, decadent court, but I'm going to say less about that and show you this clip with Teresa Stratas, one of my favorite singers and actresses. So there's a banquet going on. Herod, the king, is present, as is Herodias, his wife. Many other people. Salome has joined. She is holding back. She's very reserved. I'm just going to leave it to the music and the scene to kind of tell you what's going on. I chose this also in part because it has English subtitles, so you can understand the text, because the opera is of course in German. Here we go. Oh wait, I just forgot to tell you, he's hearing things. He's starting to go crazy. So he's hearing things. He's like, oh my God, where are those voices? Where are those voices? That's the beginning of this scene.
Horch, hört es nicht? Das Rauschen von Märchenfliegen. Du bist krank, wir wollen hineingehen. Ich bin nicht krank, aber deine Tochter ist krank zu Tode. Niemals hab ich sie so blass gesehen. Ich habe dir gesagt, du sollst sie nicht ansehen. Hängt mir Wein ein. Salome, komm, trink Wein mit mir, einen köstlichen Wein. Caesar selbst hat ihn mir geschickt. Tauche deine kleinen Lippen hinein, deine kleinen roten Lippen, dann will ich den Becher leeren.
Ich bin nicht durstig, tetrarch.
Hörst du, wie sie mir antwortet? Diese deine Tochter.
Sie hat recht, warum strahlst du sie immer
Trink
an?
reife Früchte. Salome, komm, iss mit mir von diesen Früchten. Den Abdruck deiner kleinen weißen Zähne in einer Frucht seh ich so gern. Beiß nur ein wenig ab, nur ein wenig von dieser Frucht. Dann will ich essen, was übrig ist.
Ich bin nicht hungrig, tetrarch.
Du siehst, wie du diese deine Tochter erzogen hast.
Meine Tochter und ich stammen aus königlichem Blut. Dein
Okay, I'm going to stop it there. There are many scenes in this opera that show the dysfunction of that family, but that one's particularly good. Subsequently, things just escalate and escalate. So eventually, things escalate on this evening where there's drinking and dysfunction, and it's just horrible. And eventually, he sits down and he says, or he stands up, or whatever he does. He says to her, "Tanz für mich." And she defies him at first, as she's done all along. And she then kind of makes a deal with him. And she says, well, give me whatever I want after that. In the meantime, one part that I've kind of left out of this, but it's really important, is that she has suddenly gotten wind of Yochanan, who is imprisoned underneath, and she's become really obsessed with him and wants him desperately. So yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. Oh, I want to turn to our special guest, who I'm thrilled to have joined us. Hi, Summer. Nice to hear
Hi
you.
there. Hi, everyone.
Yeah. So Summer did the choreography for this current production at the Metropolitan Opera with Claus Guth. And yeah, I would love it if you could first maybe just give a brief introduction to yourself, who you are, kind of a little bit about your background. I know you go back and forth between California, New York, and Berlin, which is right down the lines of who we are in Freiburg.
Sure, sure. Sorry, my little workroom here with all my stuff in the back. Sorry. Yeah, I'm from California originally. And after going to the University of California at Santa Cruz, getting my bachelor in theater arts with kind of focus on movement and directing, I moved to San Francisco for a few years and then applied for an Alexander von Humboldt Foundation fellowship, which brought me to Germany. And I never left. The long story and short version is that I just never left. And I live in Berlin, and I've lived here for 25 years, and I work as a choreographer and a director in theater, in dance, and in opera. So that's basically how I landed where I am.
That's great. So opera is, of course, what we're talking about here, right? How did you get involved in opera as opposed to other art forms?
It's sort of accidental, actually. I think in a way it's sort of destined because I always really loved the arts separately. I love movement, I love music, I love acting, and this is actually the place where they all come together. So I think originally a director had seen my work and just asked if I would be interested. I had done one opera in my younger years, right after college, as a kind of a favor to a friend, but I otherwise didn't have that much experience. So maybe my career in opera started about, I would say, 12 years ago. And then it sort of, once I started working with Claus Guth and we got on very well, and he sort of adopted me into his sort of main team. So he's one of my main collaborators now.
Yeah, great. Well, opera traditionally has always had a dance scene in the second act. It's usually been ballet. It's usually been very traditional. This opera does have a dance scene in it, but it's a very different one, the Dance of the Seven Veils. Other than that, you've choreographed, I think, most of this opera. So there's a lot more movement and other things going on than just in the Dance of the Seven Veils.
Well, I can say a couple of things about the overarching choreography is that luckily for me, Claus Guth is somebody who he enjoys movement very much. He enjoys dance, and he likes to create and invent sort of atmospheres inside of the pieces that are different than just the sort of traditional reading. I think that's also probably a difference between American directing and possibly German or European directing. I think Europeans tend to kind of put their mark on it a little bit more and kind of go off in different directions, which can be more or less wildly connected to the story. For Claus, he likes to have, to sort of people the universe in a way that helps us kind of get into the psyche of it. So in this version of Salome, we also had a sort of there's a scene with the Jews and the Nazarenes that comes later. And for us, it was important to actually have the feeling, the idea is in Salome that the party has been happening the whole night with the Jews and the Nazarenes. We just see them later. So we get glimpses in this version of Salome of a party going on at the back, and we can't really see all of it, but sometimes it kind of moves out into parts of the balcony that we can see. And it's a kind of an important other aspect to tell us a little more about this world of the King Herod, that is basically corrupt from, every angle. It's and specifically what it has to, how he looks at women and deals with kind of a male society and their focus on women. So there's a kind of a woman at the back who's sort of been hired as entertainment for this male society. And a lot of that gets reflected towards the front when we see how Salome behaves as a young girl, a young woman, that we see, oh, she's learned a lot from the kind of, I would say, sick characteristics of her stepfather. You can kind of tell she was raised around things that are not appropriate for children, and that there's an inappropriate relationship from the very beginning. There are also some servants, and the servants kind of serve the main purpose of showing us, I think, how restrictive and orderly the society is kind of on the outset. It purports to be very orderly and efficient, and everything is, like carefully choreographed when something gets poured, where it comes from, who goes where. And yet underneath the whole thing is a bubbling chaos that's about to erupt. So that's kind of the world he put together there.
Yeah. Okay. That's really interesting because it's one act, right? And it all takes place in this banquet room, right? And a little bit on the balcony. And then there's the cistern where John the Baptist is underneath, imprisoned by him. So it's just these three worlds that are interacting with each other, and the craziness that goes on underneath. Yeah. So the one of the scenes I thought was really fascinating was when so Salome becomes obsessed with John the Baptist. She hears his voice, and suddenly she says, "Who is this man down underneath?" And I want to see him. I want to be with him. And there's a really beautiful scene, I think, where he goes down into the cistern, and that too is beautifully choreographed, in my opinion. You want to just talk about that for a minute?
Well, I mean, the whole I'll kind of use that also to talk about the girls, because I think it's a big part of how we understand Salome and this production, is that our Salome is split into seven, including the singer of Salome. The seven veils of Salome are seven girls, so seven Salomes at various ages. And this is kind of helpful to understand the kind of, again, here, the abuse she suffered through her stepfather, the way that he looked at her and dealt with her in inappropriate ways, and what that kind of did to her. Kind of helps us learn about how she felt maybe powerless for a while, and why she suddenly, where she gets this desire to kind of take over, and how she's learned to also manipulate him to get what she wants. So we have these girls who all look exactly like the singer, coming out at different moments. And one of them is, leads her down to this cistern, to the cellar, basically. And there are two scenes down there, and they are both peopled with either one or many of the Salomes, which we refer to as the Salominis. The Salominis. And that was a lot of work with these kids also to I mean, these kids are from 7 years old to 20, and they're very beautifully creepy in a way, because they come out in these strange moments of her psyche. And so you see these levels of childlike behavior, of some of them sitting very still for a long time, or reaching suddenly for a doll. And you can kind of understand that all of this is happening in the background of Salome's mind and emotion while she's grappling with this John the Baptist. And so a lot of that was kind of also figuring out, that's something that the director and I work closely to find also, is where does the main focus for the audience need to be, and how can we add to that without making it too chaotic? So sometimes there's a lot of stillness or slow motion, lighting, obviously, also. There's the girls.
I wanted to show this. You're already talking about the seven girls.
Yeah.
There she is. And those are the seven veils, right? When the dance
Yeah.
comes in. Yeah. I mean,
It's kind of just like they are peeling away at each of her layers in a way. Yeah.
Yeah. Can you talk about that? The Dance of the Seven Veils? That's what a lot of people go to see in this opera.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting because it's a weird pressure, actually, because it's such a famous thing. And I've done a couple different Salomes, and it's always a sort of okay, how do we make this into something that is effective in the way that it's supposed to be effective? I think oftentimes people run the risk of saying it needs to be sexy and the dancer needs to do like a striptease kind of thing. And it's like, yeah. So we kind of did it's more of an inner striptease, I think. It's like a striptease of the soul or the psyche in a way. We start with the youngest, and the situation for these 7 veils, the 7 girls, is that Salome really sets up the dance. She kind of, in a way, already starts working on the stepfather earlier, going, I know he wants this from me. I know he wants this from me. I'm going to get him so excited about it that he will give me anything. And then she finally says, all right. And then she makes him watch a version of himself. So there's a double of the Herod who's also there kind of doing these actions. So she kind of forces him to say, all right, that was me at 7, and here's what we did. And all of it is through the lens of ballet in a way, that as if you kind of imagine Salome was, sent to ballet as a child and was constantly having to perform for her father. So we didn't want to just go, it's, various forms of sexual abuse. It's actually all through the language of ballet and the physicality and the kind of tilts and turns of how a father should be, correcting the arms of a dancer. Where should he be standing? Should he be that close? Should he be behind her when he's bending her and stretching her legs? And it just like step by step goes too far. And of course, when you're doing this with little girls, it's another tricky thing of having those conversations and saying to them, okay, this is, and of course we used for the 2 older 1, 2, 3, 4 girls were all under 18, and then girls 5 and 6 were over 18. And that's where it starts to get a little more complicated too. So I was quite happy that we had adults, consenting adults that I could speak to about the material. And with the kids, we used, more languages of, the dad he's unpredictable, and he's sometimes very mean, and he can be really tricky and trick you into things. And so, but they're smart, and a lot of them are performers, and they were quite, I have to say, professional, really, and super excited about every little thing they got to do, and just magic and heart-wrenching. I mean, the first time that I worked the dance, I created the whole choreography before adding Elsa, the singer, because I wanted her to be able to see, okay, here are the things we want you to do. And then with the ability to adapt it to things that she felt or that we worked out together. And the first time she saw it, she said, I can't, I don't know how to be on stage with this. She was like, I don't know how to. So it was hard for her to see, which I thought was a good sign, because I think, okay, it's doing the thing it's supposed to do. So yeah, that's.
So you really intertwined her role with each one of, so the youngest girl comes on first. She does have a veil. It's a black veil.
That's right. Each of them has a veil that
The veil is taken off, and then
Yeah.
she has a little bit of a dance. And each time Salome, Elsa, in this case, the singer, intervenes when it starts to go too far.
That's right. She interrupts. Yeah.
It's as if she's protecting herself and her past by saying,
Yeah.
at the point when I was 8 years old, I could have been protected. I would have protected myself.
Yeah.
It was heart-wrenching
Yeah.
to see her go in each time and protect herself from Herod, which
Yeah.
didn't happen at that time. So
Yeah.
it was really moving. And in the end, how did it resolve? What happened?
So in the end, in a way, it's tricky, because the end is at the end of the dance, Herod's response is to say, "Ah, wonderful." Yeah, he jumps up and says, "Ah, wonderful." And I thought, how do we get from
Yeah.
where we are, showing him all of these things that he's done, where you kind of see him also moments of shame or looking away, to him saying, "Oh, that's fantastic. Thank you." And so with Elsa, we built this sort of, she takes revenge on her father's sort of doppelganger. And she really goes wild on him. You know, she basically kills her father in front of her stepfather, in front of her stepfather. And then, kind of as an end, she does a sort of kiss and bow to say, and there you are, I have danced for you. And in this way, he sort of uses it to go, okay, I'm just going to stay with that last image that she
Right.
blew me a kiss and curtsied and
Yeah.
say thank you for, you know,
Yeah.
for the
So I can tell
performance.
you a little anecdote. I'm actually very good friends with Gerhard Ziegel, who
Yeah, great. Yeah.
sings Herod. And he told me he has done this role in 24 productions, and he has never, ever done a production as that he liked as much as this one.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Could have told you that privately, but I would like to share that with everyone else. It's kind of an inspiration to go. He just said it was just one of the smartest, most brilliant, well thought out productions that he's ever done. So I
Well, and
think
he's so smart, and also this is what I love about, opera's full of all kinds of different people, and some people they're like, I know how to sing this, I know where to go, just tell me when I need to do something. Other people are constantly looking for what's new here, what can I find? And for somebody who's sung that role so often, I've actually done Salome with him before in a different production.
yeah.
So he was so constantly looking for, well, what can I change here? What can my reaction be? And I love that when we never before, he takes off there's a head, a kind of mask that they wear. And it was his idea also to say, can I not take it off in a way to sort of like deal with my own shame? And I thought, fantastic. So that's great when you get to kind of work with the people, because as a choreographer, I have a problem sometimes when I watch something and I think, well, that looks choreographed.
Mm.
I mean, of course it's choreographed, but in a way you shouldn't be thinking about the choreography. I feel like if you're thinking too much about the choreography, then you're not in the moment, in the story, in the emotions enough. So when the singers help you find good moments, you're like, that's great, because then it sort of takes it, it's not really mine. I didn't tell them everything to do, then it's more alive and more interesting.
Well, I think it worked. Could you just talk briefly about the end? I mean, at the very so she does the dance. There's this dramatic scene where she then asks for his head. He says, "No, that's crazy," and he gives her all these crazy alternatives. He wants to give her pearls and jewels and half of the kingdom, and it starts to go off the rails. And but then she becomes obsessed with him. I mentioned this earlier. You weren't on board with that, but the two things that I think people really that are hard in this opera for the audience, it's very different than going to see Bohème, where there's this wonderful love story, but are the Dance of the Seven Veils, and then her with this head of John the Baptist and wanting to kiss him.
Mm-hmm.
You just talk about that a little bit, and how did you, because I'm sure you choreographed that scene as well, did you not?
Well, I mean, I think Klaus and I, because he really is a choreographic thinker as well. Even when he directs, he has a lot of how he understands space and physicality is really incredible, really impressive. So we end up doing quite a bit together. He'll see things in what I'm doing, and I see things in what he's doing, and kind of putting it together there. I mean, the end, it's such a long end, but I essentially there's probably a couple different ways to interpret why she needs the head. Why does she want him killed? Why does she want to kiss the head? What is it? And I think you can come at it from different angles, but I think one of the nicest things is the way that she does it. She leaves all of it open to interpretation. What we see, or what I think we see, is somebody who needed to take control of her own narrative and also hurt the stepfather. You can't have the thing you've been keeping in the cellar anymore. Nothing should be locked up in that room anymore. Every time we go down there, you feel like it's remnants of her youth. That you see these kind of pale children there, and you think, wow, that's the room of captivity and suffering. And so in a way, it's almost like she's freeing all of that, and in that she takes him. And I think the obsession with him is also maybe the obsession with alternative with the freedom of breaking out of where she is. So I think what's really nice is that she kind of, in a way, not apologizes to the head, but she sort of has this great conversation with this head that's like, why didn't you just let me kiss you before? None of this had to happen. It's almost like in a way, like, God, everybody made me, everybody made me take it so far, but here we are. And now I get to decide. I make the rules. And you kind of, I think what's really nice and kind of strange is that in this moment also where she, there's these like the girls are also in the room frozen. And in this moment when she finally kisses the head, it's like she's freed everybody. The girls can move. They all kind of join again um, into one body is my feeling of it. And they kind of support her in that. And in with this one kiss, in a way, she's exploded the entire uh, kingdom stage palace. It's just everything fell down. I mean, I think it's a really powerful and kind of strange image when we come back to the space and you hear very last thing of, Herod going, somebody should kill this woman. And it's like, it's not going to happen. Nobody's listening to you anymore. And I think that's for me one of the greatest things is that she just kind of, in a way, she's absolutely brutal, but also in a way completely understandably like, well, it didn't have to go this way, but here we are.
Well, that's
So
fascinating. I think, we talk a lot about opera, especially the older canon operas with stories that are outdated and hard for audiences to understand today. This is one of the few stories, Tosca is another one of them, where women, end up dying in the end. And I guess this is open to interpretation, whether or not she died or not, but really do step up and take agency, as we would say today,
yeah,
in their own past and their own lives. And Salome does it through her sexuality, no question about that. But that's all she knows, as you're saying, because that's the way she's been treated, not only by Herod, but also by many, many, many other men
sure.
on board
Yeah,
who have lusted from her. It starts out with Naraboth, who's
yeah,
lusting. So, but she finally, you know, takes agency into her own and so that evolution, I think in the past, oftentimes she's just been portrayed as a crazy woman, right?
yeah,
Hysterical, crazy woman. I mean, that was kind of the Freudian interpretation.
yeah,
But I was fascinated with this one because just because of her taking agency into her own painful past in this
yeah,
way.
yeah,
And I just thought it was just beautifully done. I mean, it's
yeah. Well, and Elsa is phenomenal. Also, she really she brought out so many nuances, I thought, in the role as well that really invite you. I mean, she really also as a person, she wears her emotions on her sleeve. I mean, she just she brings you in. She leaves no distance, and I think that that's just really impressive, commendable.
Well, thank you. We have some time for some questions for those of you. I think everybody's still on, actually. Um, if anyone wants to speak up and ask a question of, especially of Summer. I know you haven't seen the production, but I hope this will really inspire you to go on Saturday. There's also an encore performance. I believe it's on Tuesday night that's in the theaters. Yeah. Anyone? Everybody's so silent when the mics are, when everybody's muted, there's this like dead silence on the other
Right.
side. Um,
Yeah, it's probably hard without having seen it, I think.
no, I know, but I hope we've inspired you to see it. All right. Well, I hope you see it. I think, I was talking quite a bit actually about the music and the juxtaposition of, the traditional music that Strauss has this incredibly lush melodies, beautiful, lush, gorgeous orchestration. And yet there's some really harsh, modernism in his music that it comes into this piece. I think the other thing to think about, and I'm sure you use this in your choreography, is just how the music so is the story, right? I
Yeah.
mean, not only there's, you're not, and maybe you can just talk really briefly about how the music, you could almost actually do it without text, I think sometimes, but the drama in the music and the separation of the certain parts of the characters and their interactions can you just talk a little bit about that and how that worked into your whole concept that you and Klaus really developed
I
together?
mean, yeah, the interesting thing is too that you notice it also with the kids, because the kids pick up on these things, on certain melodies that return, or on certain people singing certain lines, things that repeat. It's a tough thing when you have to tell a kid who doesn't speak German also, okay, when they do this, and it comes 4 times and you do it the fourth time, but you can see through that repetition they understand why it's building like that. And for us also, we kind of look as she shouldn't turn on that one, she has to build it, so it helps us structure also the emotionality and understanding when do we still simmer and when does that have to tip. And Strauss will kind of tell you in some ways. Also, with this conductor also, who's just, I mean, absolutely incredible, really helped play into those exact things, especially in the dance. Like, I thought, wow, this is fantastic, because it really exactly underscored what we were also trying to do, when we were going against the music and then when we slammed back into using it. So it takes some, I would say, my sister came to the performance, and she's not an opera goer, and for her the music was difficult. As somebody who's not an opera goer, she said, it was hard for me to kind of get in and follow it. And I thought that's true. Actually, I had to also learn how to listen to opera. And now I could do a one-person karaoke evening of Salome, because I know it from beginning to end. And it seems for me it's completely logical now. So it's yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, that just speaks for the work, does it not? For the music, the work. I mean, it just is so incredible. I've seen it so many times, and I could see it again. Even though I agree, it's hard to go to. I mean, there are parts that are so revolting and disgusting. It's so violent, and in this case, the sexual harassment and abuse really is brought out. We have someone with a question, Catherine.
Thank you. I have seen Salome, gosh, maybe 17 years ago in Santa Fe. And I have a couple questions. One, I wondered if Salome was fascinated with John the Baptist because he was so pure compared to Herod. But also, I really never understood why she demanded his head. Why did that give her agency? Why not let him go free? Do you know what I mean? That's the part I never understood.
I mean, I think, again, this is sort of open to interpretation, obviously, but I think some of it has to do with her, the ownership of saying, this is mine now. You refused me. I needed something from you, and all you could do was, tell me how I'm wrong and talk about my mother, and, you refused me. And no. So in a way of, as a person who grew up around, violence and abuse, I think it was sort of like, then I'm gonna own this. This is gonna be mine now. And I think in a way in this production, which is kind of a nice, we never talked about this, but it's something I thought about. There are these shelves in the cellar, and there are kind of things on the shelves from Salome's childhood, little remnants, a little spinning top or a doll. And I thought, in a way, he was collecting parts of her. And part of me thinks maybe she's like, I don't need any of that, but I'm going to collect my own thing. I'm going to take this now and start a new collection of things that belong to me. But that's just me. So,
I think there are lots of interpretations, but I agree with you. I think one of them does have to do with the rejection, because he, I mean, even though there are moments when you think he could have said yes, right?
Yeah.
I'll go with you, but he didn't. And he's very rejecting of her, and she takes huge offense to that.
Yeah.
And I think it also has to do with the extremism, that she is subject to extreme abuse and lusting all her life. And in one of the scenes right before this, Naraboth is I can't remember who takes the sword to him and just kills him right on the stage, like right? And
well, she's trying to protect.
Get him out. He slips in the blood, and he says, "Get him off! Get him out of here!"
Yeah.
And the story goes on. So there's
Well,
extreme.
even when I mean, she's holding the sword on which he basically throws himself. And
Okay,
even her response is like, she
done.
looks down, like, kind of like, oh, all right. Anyway, moving on.
Right.
Let's talk about you. You know,
I
it's
think
it's so,
dysfunctional,
yeah,
extremism involved in it. And, I think Catherine, in her heart, she doesn't have a heart. She's lost her heart. And if she were to let him go, that would be giving him freedom and in her heart. And I don't think she was capable of doing that.
yeah.
And it also goes along with the biblical story, does it not? That John Baptist is beheaded. Actually,
Right, thank
by
you.
mother. It was the mother who demanded, not her, in the
Yeah.
book that he be beheaded. So Oscar Wilde, I forgot to mention that this is based on Oscar Wilde's play from 1891. He's the one who switched the story to have her demand the head. And
I mean, also
it actually says,
he's so
oh,
valuable.
right. Yes. And
He's John the Baptist is so valuable, and it's something that her stepfather owns right now, you know. And I think part of it is also, I'm not going to let him go. I'm not going to give him back to the father. I'm going to take his head, in a way, saying to the stepfather again, I have stolen the most valuable thing you own right now. Um, you know.
right,
So
right. Good question. Thanks, Catherine. Anyone else?
Well, just very quickly, I have to go, but I just want to say, Summer, what an amazing discussion! What an amazing honor to have you here. I hope
oh,
you guys
thanks.
keep going as long as you can. I have a train I have to catch, but this has just been fascinating. I see a lot of questions and comments in the chat room. Please go for as long as you want. I'm going to say goodbye. Thank you again so much.
Thank you, Jeff.
Bye.
I think most of
Bye
these
bye.
are thank yous. I don't see any questions here. Okay, here's one. I would be interested if Miss Ulrickson's take on Salome's interaction with manipulation of the captain. Oh, and the accidental killing of himself in this production. Yeah,
Sort of what we just talked about, that
we talked about that, but he has a different take on a different slant on that.
I mean, it's the Narabath killing in this production is suicidal, but it seems almost like yeah, it's half accident, half suicide. It's a little bit hard to say, but I think he clearly throws himself on the sword, but that she's holding, in a way. So that's I think we were trying to make it somewhere in between, but in the end it really is a suicide. I mean, he really goes for it.
Right. And at the beginning, when she's trying to talk him into giving what he's not supposed to do, there was this very sexual stuff going
Yeah.
on. And I think I've seen in different reviews completely different interpretations of that
Right.
he was taking advantage of her, but I thought clearly she was taking advantage of him.
Yes, I mean, he's been wanting this, obviously. So she's saying, like she does, okay, this is how I get stuff in this house because that's how men treat me. So, and I think the nice thing we tried to do too is it's hard to watch at the same time, but at the very back in the party, you also see, men following this naked woman around, and like her kind of, telling them what to do, but them also wanting something from her. And you see, like, yep, that's what she grew up with. Those are the parties, those are the people she's around. All the men look at her, all of them want something from her. And she's clearly using him to get what she wants. Yeah. And he's doing it.
Yes.
Right.
Well,
I think one of the interesting parts about this, and I actually mentioned this before, but thanks for the question, is that ambiguity, right?
Mhm.
He goes in there. What does she want from him? Does he want it back from her? There's that ambiguity in there, and that's one of the things I love about art, and especially German art. I have to say, is that oftentimes it's just not clear, and it can be up for interpretation. It could
Yeah.
have in many different ways, but it didn't, because in the end, he went back and rejected her with vehemence. By the way, right? It's not subtle at all. But there was a moment when you thought, he could be interested. So yeah, I think it's, yeah.
and then also were the religious Jews, who had the very technical arguments and so on, they appeared to be among those up above, which I thought was a little shocking. But
I think one of the things that Klaus wanted to play with was the, in German you would say Schein versus Sein, like the appearance, the outward appearance of like, we are correct, we are holy, we are buttoned up until here, and then what's actually going on underneath. So you see it in, the servants in Herod and everybody's dress, that they, there's lots of proper things, like the men are all standing at the sides, ready to, bring things on. The men at the back are dressed also up to here, but they're following around a naked woman and drinking. But as soon as they come down to discuss the religion, it's like none of that other stuff ever happened. And so I think that's something that he really wanted to play with, is like,
Everyone I know who's seen it said it was like the best thing they've seen in a very long time. So I hope it's selling okay for them.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, no, I think it's doing pretty well.
I mean, again, it's not Bohème. It's never going to have that level. But I think for those of us in the opera world, this is just one of the best things that could happen at this point, because we are struggling to keep the art form going. We are struggling to get it well done on the stage, and this just tops them all, in my opinion. So,
Yeah, well, that's great. I'm glad.
there was one more question.
Thanks so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Psychological question. What's this? Off topic but unrelated. Juliana, are you there? Do you want to just ask your own question?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. This has been amazing. I haven't seen the production, but I like what you are describing. And I have one comment and one question. The comment is, I recently went to see John Proctor is the villain on Broadway, the theater production. And I think there's a clear, it seems to me, elective affinity about what they did in this production and what you've been doing in a scene like Salome. It also ends with a dance of empowerment for
nice.
an abused young girl. And also my question is about this scene, and as far as you can address that, you describe the difference between the younger girls and the older girls in that particular scene, and how the more challenging moments are performed by the older girls. And I'm wondering how the younger girls, whom I assume are perhaps still on stage as this is going on. Of course, I don't know how they negotiate viewing this, experiencing that, but perhaps they're already off stage at that point. I'm curious if you could share that, in as far as you know how they I mean, if they see it, then they must have some reactions to it, I would suppose. Thank you.
I think sure. I think that they're in the show, they're not on stage anymore, but of course they were in the rehearsal space. They've seen everything in the dance, which I also felt was important, because I feel like, they are all part of the same, and they sometimes have to do things that they have to kind of know all the corners of the Salome personality, I think. I think what's really amazing and sweet about these girls is they really see Elsa, I think, as like the hero, and they watch her protect them, and they watch her protect the other older girls, and they watch her win at the end. They watch her kind of come into herself. So I think in a way they feel empowered, and sort of like also the fact that they're performing a version of the thing that was done to them. So they're not, having to like lay there and take something that was done to them. They're performing like, hey, you watch me show you how I feel about what you did. And so I think in a way, it seemed like they all felt really kind of, I don't know, they had a real enjoyment of it, I would say. There's a really sweet interview that was done by the Metropolitan Opera with these girls on Instagram that is just unbelievable. Somebody interviewed them, and just the answers they give to things, you think, wow, they're pistols. I mean, they're on top of it. They love Elsa. They're like, yeah, we're awesome. Team Salome. They feel really like related. So I think in a way it was challenging. It was hard to find ways to talk about it, but I think also they really supported each other. So yeah.
That sounds fabulous. Thanks for sharing that. I really can't wait, and I encourage you to do more like that. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
and come back to the Met. All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Unless there are more questions, I think we'll wrap this up. Thank you all for coming. It's nice to see you all, and what an incredible guest. Thank you so much for your insights.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, this was really great. Would love to hear feedback from you all. If you do see it, you know, shoot me a text or send it to Birgit, who I think is still on the call. Birgit, are you still here?
Yes.
Yeah, there she is.
Yes, I'm on.
Yeah, there's Sabina. Hi, Sabina from Freiburg. Nice to see you there. Thanks for joining. And Christina Eithauser is also here from Freiburg. So we brought in a couple from Germany. That's why we changed the time to this daytime time. I think it worked out well. So, all right, Summer, thank you so much for being here. This was
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thanks for
Bye.
joining us. See you next time.
Thank you.